Hello. So today we are going to talk about the Gone series. All right, so we're not just going to talk about the Gone series, but I will give you a quick synopsis of the Gone series. So the Gone series is a young adult series that was started coming out in the mid 2000s. I believe this first one came out somewhere around 2005, 2008. Started coming out in 2008. I believe the last book came out somewhere around like 2015, 2016. Following a giant, there are 6 books, and then there was a sequel trilogy, which I haven't read, so we're not going to talk about. There were 6 books in the main series. It was about this town in California, and one day it gets encased in this bubble, and everybody over the age of 14 disappears. This was not uncommon in the late 2000s. These long, incredibly long kind of boys books. These are a series that would appeal to teenage and middle school boys, which is something that I think has been lost a little bit recently. Like there are still, obviously, you can read whatever you want, and there are plenty of boys who really enjoy, who will read, like more romantic stuff. I do think it's hilarious, not hilarious, but I do think it's kind of interesting. On Book Talk, there are a good handful of accounts of these young men, like their 20s, whose girlfriends very clearly love to read, and they very clearly love to read like your prototypical book talk books, like your romances, your dark romances, romanticy, stuff like that. And so when these young men are starting to enjoy reading, they're just taking their girlfriends' books, and I just think it's interesting. Those are like the 2 flavors of like popular men on Book Talk, are the ones whose girlfriends clearly love to read, and the fantasy bros. And there are also the horror guys in there too. But anyway, the Gone series was one of many. Other series included the Enemy series, the Chronicles of Nick, the Lockdown series, the Quarantine. That I think I still have the first Enemy book. But yeah, those were just some examples of other books that were written as what I see as boys' books. Obviously, I enjoyed them when I was a young girl. I mean, like I was, the Gone series has been my favorite series since I first started reading. It is so good. And out of all those other ones, the only other series that I think that I would put at even anywhere near the same level as the Gone series would be the Enemy series, which is about a zombie apocalypse in like England. And it's also like 7 books long. All these series are super long. Like I'm talking at least 5 books, normally more. I think the only one that's shorter might be the Quarantine, the Loners. I don't exactly remember what the series is called. I only read the first book. But I think that only has 4 books, but everything else is, 5, 6, 7 books long. And so I've read, and as I'm thinking about this, I'm wondering if maybe the only reason why I think the Gone series and the Enemy series are so much better than the other ones is because they're the only series that I read the entirety of as a teenager. But talking about the Chronicles of Nick, I did also read those ones as a teenager. I didn't read the entire series. I'm pretty sure I still have book 6 in the book right now. But I've read a good chunk of them as a teenager. And Lockdown and Quarantine, the Loners or whatever, I just recently read the first book of as an adult, as an English teacher. And so I'm wondering if I would have not liked Gone as much if I hadn't read it until I was 23, 24 years old. I'm not either of those ages now. I'm 26. But you know what I mean, like early mid-20s. But I don't think so. I think that maybe a good portion of my love for the Enemy series could be nostalgia talking. Because although I do enjoy, I think the Enemy series has influenced me as a writer in a way because it's not written chronologically, which I think is super fun. But the Gone series, I think, is a little bit different. The Gone series, as a horror lover, the Gone series was great because it's like a science fiction-y, horror-y fantasy situation, and it's super dark. And it's all these series are fairly dark. But another thing that I think the Gone series does well, that a lot of these series don't, that definitely the Loners doesn't, definitely Lockdown doesn't because there aren't any, is the female characters. And you might disagree with me. You might think that Gone just does not give its female characters enough screen time. We're kind of set up to dislike them when we really shouldn't. But the Gone series was really before its time in terms of that. I think that in terms of diversity and about, both in terms of sexual orientation and, skin color, stuff like that, Michael Grant, the author of the Gone series, is a white man. Growing up in the 2000s and early 2010s, I was born in 1997. The first gay character I ever read was in a Cassandra Clare book. It was Alec and Magnus from the city of Bones, city of Ashes. And so to have Decca talent in this series, and later on Adelio. Adelio actually, my little brother read these books, and Adelio is actually what cured my little brother's homophobia, because he really liked Adelio. He thought Adelio was the coolest character ever, and then Adelio was gay, and he's like, okay. I'm sure it wasn't as complex as that, and I grew up in a very open-minded family. So it's not like we were getting like stuff shoved down if it was from our family. I did grow up in rural North Dakota, so it's like the culture is not, great. But yeah, no. So that and besides that, going back to the female characters, besides people like Astrid and Diana, yeah, like Brianna, Lana. Granted, Michael Grant did forget that he made Lana a Native American in the first book, because he forgot a lot of stuff. Like, he also forgot about Astrid's power and everything like that. But yeah, all those things were super great characters, and our one-note characters too, even like Duck Zhang. And I will say my favorite character is probably a stereotype. I guess my favorite character is Howard Bassem, who is he's the same. He's one of the older kids in the phase. He's the same age as our main group. He starts off as a very minor antagonist. Like, he's on the antagonist side, but he's just not very threatening. And then he eventually, he'll flip-flop, he goes back, but I think he's, I don't know if I'm just reading so much character into him, or if he actually has that much character, but he is also a young black drug dealer. So there's that. If you want to illicit substances in the phase, you do go to the young black man. But I don't know, that could be reading too much into it with my English major brain, and I don't know if that's actually like a real issue or not. I like him as a character. I think the character is fantastic. And I think all the characters are fantastic. And I think that's where the Gone series and also the Enemy series succeeded, where a lot of these other series didn't. Because in the Chronicles of Nick, all the characters are super one note. All of them. Like, they've all got like a gimmick. And same with Lockdown. And same with Quarantine. The Enemy, honestly, even the Enemy is not, they're not very developed. My favorite character in the Enemy is Achilles. And he's the scary guy. And I'd say the Enemy characters are maybe 2-note. They're not 1-note. They've got maybe 2 things. Like Achilles, he's the scary guy. But he also doesn't like hospitals or something. Oh, I'm pretty sure he didn't like hospitals. I think that was it. So it's like they're 2-note, but in the Gone series, they're allowed to be a little bit better than that. And again, this could just be nostalgia talking, but I don't think it is. I think the series is legitimately that good. And it is, it is super dark. For a young adult series, especially the Gone series, is super dark. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Obviously, I don't think that's a bad thing. I read mostly horror, and I do think that we can write about anything we want. And the minute we stop writing about whatever we want, that's sort of the minute we get our issues. I think the characters are really what make this series a lot better than the other series. And also, I think the fact that Michael Grant had a whole hell of a lot more experience than these other authors when he started writing this series. Michael Grant's been writing professionally for years. His wife is Kay Applegate, who you might recognize if you're younger from things like The One and Only Ivan, and if you're older, you might recognize from fucking Animorphs. So Michael Grant helped with the Animorphs, and if you've read the Animorphs books, you'll know, like, oh, so that's the kind of dark that we're talking. Because Gone and Animorphs I think have a lot of very similar themes and kind of ways of going about things. The Animorphs are even for a younger audience, So a lot of like there's not a ton of like sexual violence in the Gone series. There's some threats, but it's very it's subtle enough that if you're younger, it'll go right over your head, and all that's obviously not in place in the Animorphs books, which are for children. Animorphs are for children; these are for teenagers. But yeah, I think the experience really makes it. Like, Gone was, I think, his Michael Grant's breakout success. I think he was writing mostly, you know, like stuff like Animorphs, where it's like parts of a series under a different author's name kind of thing. He has been writing professionally for years before Gone came out. And so it's really what kickstarted him. After Gone, he had, you know, Frontlines and Berserk and Messenger of Fear, which wasn't actually very good. Messenger of Fear was kind of blah. And then the Gone sequel trilogy, which I haven't read. I have not read the Gone sequel trilogy yet. And I have the entire trilogy in the book wall. Like, I will be reading the Gone sequel trilogy at some point in my life. But it kind of scares me because I think the Gone series, every single time, I recently reread the entire series, front to back, this year, even, I think, throughout the month of June, May and June. I didn't read them like one after another, but I read book 1, then book 2, then book 3, etc. And when I finished it, the same thing happened as always happens when I finish Light, and I bawled my fucking eyes out. I cry every single time I've read the book, Light, which is the last book in the series. I cry so hard. If you want to know why, I'm not going to spoil it, but if you've read the book, it's the Blaze of Glory. It's that whole thing. And the fact that that a villain, the main, not the main villain, the main villain is the guy of age, but the main human villain, that's insane. That is insane. The characters are so good, and I do love, we're talking about the main human villain, talking about Cain. The fact that you can see this guy who's evil, he's terrible, he's an awful human being. He's also 15 years old, and you can tell that. Like, he's got moments, mostly with Diana, but also not, where you can tell that this is a 15-year-old kid. And as somebody who's been teaching, who's in her 4th year teaching, I taught high school for the first 3 years. Now I'm down in 5th grade. First of all, 15-year-olds are terrible people anyway. It's a miracle more of these kids, most of these kids survive, because it's like the oldest kids here are freshmen in high school. Although I will say, I don't think Michael Grant quite understands ages in high school, and also the whole forgetting thing, because there is a character starting in book 2, Hunter Lefkowitz, who at the beginning of the book, and this is within the exact same book, at the beginning of the book, he is stated to be a 7th grader. 7th graders are 12 turning 13. That's how old 7th graders are. They're 12 turning 13. So they're 12 or 13, maybe a little older or a little younger, depending on where their birthday is. So when I was a 7th grader, I was barely 12, because I was born in July. And then the next year around, when I was in 8th grade, I was 13. When my brother, who was born in September, like early September, was a 7th grader, he was 13 basically right away. Or obviously if you get held back, or if you go to school late, you know, that sort of thing. But either way, a 7th grader is going to be somewhere on the range of 12, 13. And unless there's something big going on, they're probably not going to be 14 years old. Later on in the exact same book, they say that he says that Hunter is days away from turning 15. So that means he's not only 14 years old, but an old 14, like almost 15. And so in my head, like, I know it's just a mistake, because there are tons of little mistakes like this, and that doesn't really take away from the reading, honestly. There are tons of little just like consistency issues like that. In my head, I was like, okay, let's fix this. Maybe this kid got held back. Maybe he is an idiot. Like, I'm just saying. Like, although then later on in the next book, because Hunter's thinking about like how he used to be a lot smarter, because he remembers he used to like answer hard questions in class. So I'm like, so that takes away the stupid thing, you know? I don't know, but it's just, I have a lot of feelings about these books. I don't know. Again, I don't know. There's definitely some element of nostalgia talking, but I don't think it's all nostalgia. I do think that they're good. I do think that they're legitimately good books. It's a legitimately good, exciting series. And I think that everybody should read these. Everybody who's got a teenager, or even yourself, who wants something fast-paced and interesting and fun with a large cast of characters, some good gore and a lot of dark themes. I think it's the best one. And I do wish that we were still getting series like this, because we don't really anymore get these, like, boys books, to get these, like, long series about with a large cast of characters and lots of, like, violence and stuff like that. And normally we've got, like, a main character who's, like, an underdog and got bullied and stuff like that. We've got some really one-note bullies. But in the Gone series, that's the thing, they weren't one note. They start off looking like that way with Orc and Howard, but then as the series goes on, they also get developed, which I think was maybe the big thing. Every single character, until they, die horribly, gets developed in these books, whether they're the main character or the one note bully, But yeah, that's all I have today. I'll talk to you later, and goodbye.